Welcome to Sunshine Ministries, where we talk about that old time religion and ask the question, is it good enough for me? Today we'll discuss my faith. Have I lost it? And we'll talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of religion and religious faith. I'm asked often enough why I spend so much time reading and studying the Bible, why I want to talk about religion and religious faith when I myself have grown past religion and I no longer need religious faith in my life to find meaning, purpose, love, joy, peace, and contentment. You see, I no longer believe most of the things that make a person a Christian, and this causes many Christians to wonder why I even care if I don't believe the things that they do. The answer is that religion, religious faith, and the Christian church have been such a big part of my life for my entire life. What's more, religion and Christianity specifically have done more to shape Western culture than just about any other single thing. I don't see why it wouldn't be of interest to everyone, believers or not. When believers find out that I once believed, but no longer do, quite often the first question they ask is, what tragic thing happened in my life to cause me to lose my faith? I find it noteworthy that whenever anyone moves away from a particular religious viewpoint, those who still hold that viewpoint view the person moving away as having lost something. It doesn't seem to ever occur to them that the person moving away may be moving away because they have found something. Perhaps they have gained more knowledge. Perhaps they have a better understanding, more wisdom, a different perspective. It's always framed in the context of that person having lost something. I think this is deliberate. If it is framed in any other context, it might draw attention to the shortcomings of religious faith. And since the assumption so often is that some tragic thing happened to cause a person to lose their faith, there is an acknowledgement up front that religious faith doesn't always deliver on its promises of making the hard parts of life easier. Otherwise, tragedy would almost always result in drawing people closer to their religious faith, right? So even in the question, what tragic thing has happened in your life to cause you to lose faith, there is an acknowledgement of religion's shortcomings. So it is framed that anyone who once believed but no longer believes, well, they have lost something. They have lost their faith, and they are to be pitied. If they're not willing to come back to the faith, back to the fold after much correction, they are often shunned. Else, whatever devil caused that person to lose their faith might steal yours too. So I want to assure you of something. I haven't lost anything. I have not lost my faith. I know exactly where it is. It's right over there on the shelf where I left it. It's still in the tiny little box it came in. I can look at it from a distance. I can look at it from here. Or I can take it off the shelf and I can examine it more closely. It's just like a favorite sweater that I've loved dearly over the years, but which no longer fits me. It tried to stretch to keep up with me as my worldview got bigger and bigger, but at some point it just started coming apart at the seams. It's so worn out now that I can poke holes in it without even trying. And it no longer keeps me warm and comfortable like it used to. So it sits on the shelf. Some people who grow past faith just move on with their lives and leave their faith behind. Some have no more use for it and toss it out like yesterday's trash. But I think a lot of people, like me, just put their faith on a shelf. After all, for me, it's been a dear friend over the years and decades. Yes, at times it hasn't been a great friend. Sometimes it's been a lousy friend. It tended to always be promising me things that it couldn't deliver, which is something I'm able to admit to now, but I would have never admitted to that in times past. But even so, For the most part, I've always looked at my faith as a dear friend and one I'm not just so quick to throw away, even if it no longer serves a purpose in my life. I'm not the only person who has put their faith on a shelf. Your church has people in it that have done it too. You know it's true. Every church has a small core group of true believers, while the bulk of the members are pretty much there for the ride. Perhaps they're there because their family is there. Perhaps they're there because they like the social aspect of belonging to a church. For some, it's the only social network they have. So they stick around and are part of the church, but they're not one of the true believers. As uncomfortable as this may be to hear, virtually everyone in your church knows it's true. The true believers know that they're a small minority in the church. And everyone else knows that they're just along for the ride, but they'll never tell you that. So my faith sits over there on a shelf, and I keep it around to remind me of the many years we've had together. There was a lot of good in those years, but there was a lot of bad, and quite a bit of ugly. So let's talk. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of religion and religious faith. First, let's talk about what is the good part of religion and religious faith. Religion and faith provide community, which includes a circle of friendship and social activities, and a support network to help you through difficult times in life. These things are very important in life to everybody. Every human being on the planet wants to be part of a community. Every single human being on the planet wants to have a social network and to have people who will be there for them during life's difficult times. Religion and faith also provide a belief system and a moral guidance which gives answers to some of the difficult questions of life. Finding what you believe and what moral compass fits you are difficult things for a person to do on their own. It takes a lot of effort. It is much simpler when those things are just handed to you. And let's be honest, most people in your church believe what your church teaches, not because they've studied extensively and arrived at the same conclusions your church has. No, most people are looking for answers, and they'll accept the answers that are laid out for them, especially if those answers are given to them by people they see as good, loving, and part of a social network that they want to be part of. As I mentioned earlier, you can be part of a social network of a religion or church and not really believe. But there are certain motions you have to go through to fit in. But moving completely past a religious belief system often means having to give up the social network and the community that goes along with it. And as someone who has gone down that road, I can tell you, it's not an easy thing for some of us to do. I know people who will tell you that leaving their religion and their faith and their church was the hardest thing they have ever done. And this is why so many people in church today are still there. They haven't really believed in a very long time, but it's the only community they're part of, and that is more important to them than the belief system they know in their heart they no longer believe. So, community, a social network. These are the good parts of religion. These are good things, and their importance and attraction cannot be underestimated in the lives of individuals who benefit from them. For many people, these are the most positive things in their lives, and they don't want to listen to someone talk about the bad parts of religion, because when you talk about those things, it's very easy to feel like you're attacking everything, that you're attacking the most important thing in their life. And they don't want to hear it. For a lot of people, they already know some of the bad parts of religion. But in their perspective, the good outweighs the bad, and you can talk until you're blue in the face, and you'll never get past that issue. So what is the bad side of religion and religious faith? Most people might think I'm referring to the bad things that Christians do. The sex scandals, the money scandals, the abuse of power scandals. And you know what? These things are bad things. but everyone knows about them, especially anyone who spent any amount of time in a church. No, that's not what I consider to be the bad part of religion. Those are just the bad parts of being human, and religion isn't immune from them. To me, the bad part of religion is that religion makes promises that it can't keep. Religion promises that if you have faith, you will be rewarded with things. I'm not talking about the afterlife. I'm talking about this life. God supposedly says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. We're promised peace that passes all understanding. If we seek, we shall find. God will protect us from evil, comfort us in sorrow, give us strength to carry on no matter what we go through. And for most people, these promises are a very positive thing in their life. But that's because of a simple truth. And that truth, it applies to everyone, religious or not. It's a simple truth, and it is this: no matter what you're going through, if you just stick with it, odds are that you'll get through just fine. You'll get to the other side and be okay. Life is like that most of the time. You don't need religion. You don't need faith. You don't need a belief system. Most people, in most situations, most of the time, if they just persevere, things will come out fine. Now, I didn't say that all people in all situations all the time will come out just fine, because that's simply not true. Life doesn't quite work that way. But religion tends to promise more in this area than it can deliver. If you believe, if you have faith, then God will see you through everything. God will comfort you in everything. God will be your strength in everything. And what happens is that most people who believe this find it to be encouraging, and they persevere, and when everything works out fine in their lives and they get to the other side of struggles just fine, they believe that it was God who worked some magic in their lives because of their faith, and their faith grows. But what if things don't work out so well? What about people who go through severe trauma? Their walking stick of faith that saw them through lesser ordeals might not be enough. They might need crutches instead. They might need more than religious faith provides. They may fall to pieces. They may need counseling. They may need mental health therapy. They may need more help than their faith or your church is able to provide. And rather than admit these things, most of the time they suffer in silence. Why? Because it must be their own fault. Religion teaches them that if they had the faith, if they believed, if they just believed in God and believed that God would carry them through, that God would do just that. God would carry them through. So to admit that they're coming apart, to admit that it's just not happening, must mean that they didn't have enough faith, which makes it their own fault, right? Many such people need counseling, mental health services. But in many parts of Christianity, especially the more fundamentalist Christianity, those things are looked down upon. And many people in churches experiencing this, who don't want to give up their social network, who don't want to give up their community, they suffer in silence, sometimes for years or decades. They hope that one day they'll find the faith to do it right, because they really do want to believe, and in the meantime, they just suffer. That's the bad side of religion and religious faith. It makes promises that it can't keep and blames its failures on those who can't make it work for them. The ugly side of religion and faith is what happens to those people who deal with the bad side of faith, but who can't somehow fake their way through their struggles long enough to get through them on their own. Their religion isn't enough. Their faith isn't enough. The good book isn't enough. They need more than their religion and faith has to offer. And when this is made clear, they're cut off from the community, kicked out of their social network. They're either sent packing or they're made uncomfortable enough to where they leave on their own. Why? Because their struggles are their own fault. After all, if they had enough faith, if they had enough trust in God, if they had enough belief, God would have seen them through their troubles. God would have given them the tools that they needed to get through their struggles to the other side, right? These are the people who are struggling the hardest, who need the most help, who really need the promises that religion makes, and who are hurt the most when those promises fail. These people often feel that God hates them. They tried to believe, they thought that they had faith, but it must not have been true faith or else it would have worked, right? And having believed with all their heart and it not being enough, what else would they think but that God hates them? If you have been in church for any length of time, then you know people like I'm describing. Perhaps you've thought it a pity that even in their hardship they wouldn't let God work wonders in their lives. That's the way it has to be viewed, right? Because faith doesn't fail. God doesn't fail. Belief doesn't fail. So if there's a failure, it's their fault. But I'm here to tell you that religion does fail. Faith does fail. And when we send away those who need us the most while clinging to our own piety by saying things like, "There but for the grace of God go I," that is nothing but ugly, ugly, ugly. This is the ugly side of faith. This is the ugly side of religion. This is the ugly side of Christianity. There are more people harmed in this manner by religion than any religious person wants to admit to. I spent 45 years in Christianity in a wide range of denominations and many different kinds of churches. And I can tell you that there is no branch of Christianity immune to these things. Yes, some of them are worse than others. In my experience, the more fundamentalist Christianity gets, the worse things get in this regard. But I've never seen or been involved in any church which didn't end up harming people. And it's usually those who needed their help the most. And to make it even worse, these victims of faith often are true believers. Because there's nothing quite like trauma to drive someone to cling desperately to the beliefs that they hope will save them. So when those beliefs and hopes don't save them, they're chewed up and spit out by their community, which has now turned on them. They are left utterly alone, having lost everything dear in their life. Truly a very ugly side of religion. And if you've spent any time in church at all, you've seen this happen to people. So there we have it. Religion and faith. The good, the bad, and the ugly. There are a lot of people who talk about the good side of faith. They're mostly religious people who would like you to be religious too. They may know of the bad side of religion and faith, but they don't ever want to talk about it. You don't make converts of people talking about the downsides of religion. And there are a lot of people who talk about the bad and the ugly side of faith, and I honestly can't blame them. There has been so much harm done, so many people hurt, so many lives ruined, so many families devastated by religion. People who express anger at religion and they're often justified by doing so, having been harmed by it themselves or seeing their loved ones harmed by it. These people rarely mention the good side of religion. In their mind, the bad side so outweighs the good side, it's not even worth mentioning. And you know what? They might be right. But I don't think you can reach a person who is still inside religion, who still clings to the positives, who still cherishes the community and social network, who have family and friends in that social network. I think it's very hard, if not impossible, to reach such a person if all you do is talk about the bad and the ugly side of faith. And while I have a lot to say about the bad and ugly side of faith, I plan to also talk about the good. It is my hope that by talking about all aspects of religion and faith, including the good, but not being afraid to point out the bad and the ugly, that I might be of benefit to someone somewhere. If you're still watching this, leave a comment on the video below and tell me what you think of the different things I've talked about. And if you think I've earned it, hit the like button. I want to thank you for dropping by and listening all the way to the end of the video. Now, we don't accept tithes here at Sunshine Ministries, but if this video has been of benefit to you, then, and you have a nickel to spare, then please drop it in the donation box on your way out the door. Captain Sunshine here. Peace and grace to you, my friend. Until we meet again.